O tēnei te mihi kia koutou, e hui hui mai nei, ka nui te mihi ki ngā whānau o taupō, o te hikuai, he mihi mahana ki a koutou, mai pihanga maunga ki tauhara. Tēnā koutou katoa. I wanted a bit of an entrance. And so I thought, now what is the best way that I can impress this massive crowd? And I decided to start with pihanga. So if I think about who we are, we always say ko wai koe. And so with a Wai Māori trust hui, I think it was always important to start out with who are our waters. And I am a little bit worried that the waters are going to be left behind because everyone who looks after them are here today. So it's good to see everybody, but I think, you know, one of the great things about the Wai Māori Trust and this hui is that it got the gang back together. You know, we are all Kaitiaki in our own rights, we are all doing the mahi at home, and I think the overwhelming response to this, I had so many people text me, "Cuz, we were late to register, have you got some hookups to get us into the conference?" And I said, "Hey, just come, we'll go across the road and have lunch if we have to." But it's wonderful to see you all. So, ko pihanga te maunga, ko taupo te moana, ko tongariro te awa. Ko hirangi te marae, ko Ngāti Turangi tukua me Ngāti Hikairo ku hapū, ko tūwhare tō te iwi, ko te heuheu te tangata, ko tīna parau tōku ingoa. But on my other hat, I am also Ngāti Parau, kia ora Auntie Ag, Ngāti Parau, Ngai Tā Manuhiri, Rongo Whakaata, from the river, Ngāti Rangi, so I acknowledge all my whakapapa and all the waters that have enabled me to come here today. I wanted to start, I'm born and bred in Turangi, even with a name like Porou, from the coast. I'm a Grace from Tūwharetō, from Ngāti Turangi tukua. And when you come into Taupō, you look across the lake and you see our kuia pihanga. And it's a really important, I guess, indicator of our connection to our wai, our whakapapa through my hapū. So when Ngāti Roirangi came to this rohe, looking for a place to settle, he looked across the lake, he was on Tauhara, he looked across the lake and he saw pihanga. The marae Atia was the lake, pihanga was the kaikāranga, and the kaikōrero were the maunga. And it's a really important conversation, I guess, when we're here in Tūwharetoa, and certainly as a uri of Ngāti Tūwharetoa to acknowledge Ngāti Roirangi and his connection to our moana. But when he stood there and looked across, he called the Atia Te Papa Māoriarea, which is the marae Atia that is the lake. And when we were doing the Māori wards, we thought, what is the name of our ward going to be? And it's called Te Papa Māoriarea. And so all of these important names connecting us to our wai are essential in the battles that we face to look after our waterways. And when Ngāti Roirangi travelled over to the rohe of Turangi tukua, of ngā hapū o te mātāpuna, the source, he was there and he was met by two Kaitiaki. They were twin Magellan clouds called Te Katakata and Te Oriori. And they're called the laughing cloud and the dancing cloud. And they actually led Ngāti Roirangi to the maunga where all the other famous kōrero around geothermal waters and his experience with his sisters Te Hoata and Te Pupu occurred. But while he was there, Te Katakata and Te Oriori led him to mai rohe in Turangi tukua. And while they were there, those two Magellan clouds turned into two springs. So there are two springs on pihanga called Te Katakata and Te Oriori. And those puna are actually the source of all of the drinking water in Turangi. So I just wanted to start the kōrero because I'm a boring policy analyst. And so the rest of the kōrero is actually really boring and dense. So I wanted to start out with what is most important about te mana o te wai, which is whakapapa. If we start te mana o te wai as a policy statement that gives us a roll around the table, we have failed. Te mana o te wai at its true heart is around mātauranga Māori and it's about whakapapa to our awa. So I wanted to start with that kōrero because some of the conversation I'm sharing with you today is the battle that my hapū has had as a result of confiscation of our lands by the Public Works Act, but also around the fact that the drinking water, the storm water and the wastewater are all situated on wāhi tapu in my hapū. Now pihanga, this is pihanga, our queer. We are really fortunate in Turangi, and I know I've got lots of cousins here from the hood who look up every day and see our queer. It is a real privilege to be with your queer in this way, and understanding the connections that she has to Ruapehu, to Taranaki, to Tongariro, to Ngā Uruhoi, and actually to all the maunga, and subsequently their way to each other. So again, whakapapa is so important around our roles and obligations. If we continue to have only conversations with the Crown and councils without understanding this, we are no better than anyone else who came on a ship over here. So the problem has been, though, colonisation has really impacted our ability to share and grow and regenerate our mātauranga, and we're seeing some of that now. And I know we've got some amazing speakers coming up over the next 2 days, particularly Charles Royal, who I've always admired, and I'm hoping to use his whakapapa diagrams that I have wrongly used without his permission. Kia ora if you're here, Charles. But I think what we have seen with Te Mana o Te Wai is a real issue for us in how we share kupu Māori, whakaaro Māori and mātauranga Māori in frameworks that are not controlled or managed by ourselves. And so as a result, we've seen mass cultural appropriation. We've seen real, I guess, opportunistic Crown officials wanting to now describe what Te Mana o Te Wai is and mātauranga Māori, and then telling us back what it is, which I find highly offensive. But one of the challenges we have is then how do we fill the vacuum? So Te Mana o Te Wai practically, at its simplest, and I have said this speech 1 million times now, I'm sick of the sound of my own voice, but guess what, you get it today. And this came from Tā Mark Solomon. And we were at a hui, and he said, the first right of water must go to water. And it resonated with everybody, because you're like, well, yeah, water needs to be centred for itself. And we've got Nancy Tuwaine talking today, mai tuakana, where is she, I don't know, but they're awesome work in whanganui to centre the awa instead of centering ourselves. And so Te Mana o Te Wai provides a framework for that conversation. The challenge we've seen around Te Mana o Te Wai to date is that councils don't understand it, don't want to resource us to understand it, and also are wanting us to give a really short, sharp, one-hit wonder, give me a paragraph that can go into the freshwater management plan. Well, as I've said, I just went back to 2,000 years of whakapapa, and that conversation is not a light one. So the challenge we have at the moment is how do we make sure that we uphold the integrity of Te Mana o Te Wai for ourselves and by ourselves to be able to then lead the whole narrative around how we look after our water. I think at the moment we are entering a phase of significant change. We have climate change. We have, the worst degradation in our waterways that we've seen in 180 years. So I always say to councils, they're like, oh, we want to use Western science. I said, 180 years ago we could eat and drink from our waterways. What is your science going to give me that my mātauranga couldn't do without you? The problem is they are so centralised about their way being the only way that we are constantly fighting for a seat around the table. The problem we have is we don't know what to say when we get there. And so we're scrapping with each other to get there because we're good at a fight. And we're good when we've got a single enemy, right? Because we're all on that. But the moment someone goes, you're here now tell us how to fix water, we go, oh, well, hang on, you didn't consult with us early enough. So our opportunity now in Te Mana o Te Wai is to create the platform by which each hapū and subsequently each iwi will be able to determine the health and well-being of our wai. It is not going to be easy. The systemic racism in place in councils mean that we're still in an inferior position. Māori wards are a step towards that direction, but there are multiple ways and methods that we have to use to be able to consider how we practically give effect to our rangatiratanga and our mana motuhake. That is not going to happen through a national policy statement on fresh water. But it is an opportunity for us to define how water will look and feel for us through mātauranga Māori. That doesn't mean also that Western science doesn't have a place. But mātauranga Māori is Diana Ross, and Western science are the Supremes. And that is how we have to make sure this works for us. So that fundamental concept of te mana o te wai in the national policy statement says really clearly. Oh, and by the way, we wrote some guidelines for hapū and iwi on how to give effect to te mana o te wai. We're going to have copies for everybody outside, and they're available online. We've also got some amazing case studies from Ngāti Rangiwiwihi, Ngāti Porou, Te Tauihu and Raukawa, who were very generous in describing their experiences with te mana o te wai. So, te mana o te wai says, and this is the actual drafting in the national policy statement. So if councils are telling you something different, they're not telling you the truth, which is why we wrote the guidelines, because they're using it as a weapon against us. So it says the health and well-being of water bodies and freshwater ecosystems must be prioritised. So as an example, if you have a consent application, a notified consent application, the decision maker must now give priority to the water, the health and the well-being. They're not doing that because one, they don't know what te mana o te wai is, and two, it's only been in place for 2 years. So we have to fill the vacuum. The second part is around supporting the health and needs of the people, such as drinking water. Now this is 3 waters in essence, and we are going to talk about that. And you're going to get sick of me today because I'm on twice today. So I apologise in advance. But we're going to go into some of the detail around the new resource management reform, 3 waters, and how we're going to get ready. Because we cannot continue to let this happen to us. We have to define it. And there are some really good hooks in these pieces of legislation, but it's going to require a significant commitment from us on top of what you already do as Kaitiaki to participate in the system. Then once the well-being of the water, the well-being of the people are covered, the rest has to be allocated for economic outcomes. Now that's very different to the current system, because the current system is councils will look at it and go, how much water can we take or pollute without it dying? So this turns that on its head and says, we've got to make sure the water's well, we've got to make sure the people are well, and then what's left over, we can share equitably amongst ourselves. So te mana o te wai provides that framework, and it also says a very key section. Every local authority must actively involve tangata whenua to the extent they wish to be involved in freshwater management, including decision-making processes. If you have been excluded, they are contravening the National Policy Statement on Freshwater. I urge you to get a really good handle on this NPS. It is, in my mind, a significant tool in transforming not only how our relationships with council exists, but fundamentally it transforms the way freshwater is managed in this country, but it's new. And the Crown has unfortunately put a deadline on freshwater management plans to 2024. So all your councils, they're on a fast trip to try and get you to define te mana o te wai, right? And they're all asking you, tell us what it is, we'll fund your wānanga, we'll facilitate, da-da-da-da-da. I'm hearing this across the country, and we're hearing real spectrums of success. Some councils are hiring internal mātauranga Māori experts, which is inappropriate. The only people who can give the mātauranga about particular awa and whenua are the hapū who whakapapa to those awa and whenua. So if they are offering you a one-size-fits-all Māori, you have to say no. It specifically enables you to define te mana o te wai. The council cannot define te mana o te wai without you. But that requires us to get a move on. And that's actually harder. It's easy, like I said, to fight the council. But if the council says to you, where do you sit around te mana o te wai? Because that's what they've said to me. Well, where does te mana o te wai fit and where do Māori fit? Everywhere. If you're making a decision, there we are. If you are doing monitoring or testing, hei konei ahau. So, but that requires massive capacity and capability, which we're all struggling with. And in fact, I've got some slides on this coming up because we really want to try and address the big gap. Because all of you are Māori unicorns. Kaitiaki and taonga protectors like you are getting hammered because the tidal wave of bad decisions around water and soil management is starting to hit people in the face. And the front line of that defence is iwi and hapū. I do not see non-Māori spending their treaty settlement money or their extra cash on taking people to court to protect taonga. I don't see anybody else at consent applications actually trying to fight to reduce discharges. I don't see anybody else except iwi and hapū. Now, I live in a brown bubble, so maybe that's why. But I've been in this game for a while now, and we are motivated, we are passionate, we are doing this for free, and it is an obligation through our whakapapa. That's compelling. But we're all getting burnt out. Because part of the, I guess, positives of actually having councils come to us is that we know what's going on. But then once you know, you've got to do something about it. And we're all struggling under that load. The amount of consent applications that are coming towards us at a huge rate. They don't want to pay us to process them, but they're requiring us to be the environmental monitoring tool to ensure these things are appropriate. So we're in this position where, yes, we've got a te mana o te wai freshwater policy statement that says we can be everywhere. Well, we need to multiply ourselves by about 3,000 to be able to address this. But I do want to go into some of the detail around te mana o te wai. And we've got a longer workshop today where I'm going to deep dive into some of these things too. But we did this project last year, funded by Our Land and Water, and worked with these whānau who are developing processes through te mana o te wai. Again, it's a real spectrum. So some of us are just starting, some of us, have thought about it, but none of us are doing this. Now, this came out of the Ngāti Porou case study, and you'll be hearing from Pia and Kate Walker today, also my cousins. So they'll be going into this into far more detail, but just to give you the highlights. This is how the NOF is supposed to work. So that's the National Objective Framework. This is actually where the rubber hits around setting limits on the water quality and quantity for your wai. None of us are involved in this. What the council say to you is, can you please define te mana o te wai and tell me the values you have for your rivers? They are also required to come and ask you to set what they call FMUs, Freshwater Management Units. They cannot set FMUs without you. So if they are bringing fully cooked freshwater management units, which are often catchment-based, you say to them, actually, we're going to figure out how we're going to monitor our whenua and our wai. So, for example, through the conversations we've been part of, choosing the area in which you're going to monitor and how for a non-Māori is often just hydrological and physiological. But for us, it's also relational. So I'll give you an example. I hope I'm not cutting your fella's sandwich, my cousins, around this kōrero, but having a conversation about where the water flows, and if there's a consent application that affects the awa, well, the water goes where the water goes. Don't care if it's in Te Aitanga Mate or Te Whānau Rākairoa, the water flows. But the people need to be collectivised and consistent with each other so we don't scrap over consent applications from a loving place. Not that we would, eh? No, we wouldn't. And so as a result, our way of defining how we're going to measure and monitor fresh water is relational, whakapapa driven, and also hydrological. So we have to have the opportunity to wānanga together to say, if we were to look at our waterways in our rohe, how would we best manage them collectively? So these are not treaty settlement negotiations, and I stress that we shouldn't get into that mana whenua discussion. If we are scrapping over who gets to look after the wai first, something's broken. This is all about service. This is all about service to our wai. So when we're having these conversations, they should be bringing us together. Because really what we want to do is look after the wai collectively. So the councils are saying to you, tell us your values, manaakitanga, mahinga kai. They're going to ask you for all the tangas. and they're going to say, cool, I know those 5, I can interpret those. What we're seeking from this new evolution of process is, if we go back to whakapapa and we deeply understand our obligations to our atua, then what does that look like when you're dealing on the ground with the well-being of the wai as your whānau member, actually as your tuakana? What does that look like? Now that's a much more evolved conversation than what the council is expecting. And I think it's not going to be an easy this is a 10-year wānanga program where we are reconnecting ourselves through our whakapapa, through the atua, back to our whenua and our wai. And everyone's doing it in different shapes or forms already. But it's the collation of that so that you can then say, as a result of those obligations, this is how we're going to monitor our wai, this is how we're going to limit what people can do on that way, and this is how we're going to enforce it. And that's what the NOF, funny name, but the NOF enables for us. But that's why you all are all Māori unicorns, right? Because we need to have somebody to go, Rikirangi Gage talks about squashing Cinderella's slipper on Papatuanuku's foot. Because that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to squash the infinite knowledge of thousands of generations into 5 paragraphs into a policy statement. So we have to figure out in ways that we've got to make sure that they get the sizzle and not the sausage. The sausage stays with us. The sizzle is what gets us around the table so we can protect our whānau, our whenua and our wai. And as I said, these examples are in those guidance because it's infrastructurally not just about te mana o te wai. We've got to break councils. We've got to create better systems that acknowledge us, and we do have to create resourcing and self-sustainable models so that we're all not, bless us, working for kina and puha. So, not that I'm saying, all the donations of kina and puha will be gratefully accepted. Look, te mana o te wai is not perfect. And when we drafted te mana o te wai, we hummed and hawed about its inclusion because it is a te reo Māori concept that will be pillaged by non-Māori. And to be honest, look, I've done so many presentations now on te mana o te wai to our wellbeing Pākehā whānau who are just all over it, right? They're like, this is the answer. And I always laugh with my cousin, Maria Nepia, who goes, oh, there's all these Pākehā whānau just like, oh my gosh, te mana o te wai. But I think that upholding the integrity of that is easy. As long as the council just go, well, who's the hapū? And we have to, I guess, rage against the push to collectivise us in a way that makes us invisible. And that's what we're seeing in some of the legislation that's coming up, and I'll talk to you about later on today. So don't make it easy for them, is what I'm saying. They're going to say to you, well, could you all cluster? Could you have one person who could just do all of this for you, we will pay them, and then you will give us a report? Not my first rodeo. But I think it's important for us to figure out what the framework is. And I look across the country, there are some amazing frameworks that have been created. Te Aroa Lakes Trust and their tuapapa, you know, Te Awa Tupua. The frameworks exist. It's taking that and then applying it in place when we're struggling to get enough people to do the basics. But the opportunity of Te Mana o Te Wai is also extending. So Te Mana o Te Wai as a concept is now also in 3 waters. And so, you know, we've just got to buckle up. I'm going to shoot through these because I'm going to try and keep to time. But I wanted to just quickly give you an example of Te Mana o Te Wai in 3 waters. And since we're in my rohe, I get to talk about my nannies. So this is the signing of the Mana Whakahono Ārohe agreement that Ngāti Turangi Tukua signed with Taupo District Council. And my cousin Tonganui is here, who is also on the Taupo District Council. Functionally, for those that don't know, the Turangi Township was once the farmland of my collective families in Turangi Tukua. In 1953, the Crown, under the Public Works Act, confiscated all our land and built the town on it. It's a contemporary claim, so the people who were dispossessed, moved out of their homes and their homes bulldozed, were still alive when the claim was put forward. And so I don't know how old I was, I'm going to say young, and waitressing as a teenager at the hearings, and it was highly politicising for me. And actually, I can blame them for who I am today. You're welcome. So those breaches of Te Tiriti o Waitangi were, you know, deep. They're deep for everybody. They're deep. They were deep for us because it took away our entire economic livelihood in 1 minute. And we all got relocated out. They sold all our land to private people. So all those houses in Turangi sold to private. So we could never claim that back in the treaty settlement. So there's a lot of mamai there. The Turangi wastewater treatment plant, built on one of our most significant wāhi tapu and on confiscated land from one particular whānau, or two or three particular whānau. So that wastewater treatment plant, we opposed the consent for renewal, and we are still in that process. But as a result, we used Te Mana o Te Wai in our cultural impact assessment to say, you are not looking after the health and well-being of the water, you are not looking after the health and well-being of the people, and as a result, we're in discussions to move that wastewater treatment plant off the lake because it currently discharges treated waste into the lake. So close your mouths when you're swimming. So we're trying really, really hard to be able to change that. The trout's fine. And then we've got the drinking water take. So as I said earlier, the puna that come from Pihanga, our kuia at the back, supply all of Turangi for the drinking water. It is some of the most highest quality drinking water in the country. But it's also extracted from land that was confiscated from by the Crown and then handed back to us in our treaty settlement. So we actually own the land on which all of the water is taken for the Turangi Township. So consent comes up, ta-da, we oppose. And we're still in opposition. But we're actually working really closely with the Taupo District Council and have agreed some really fundamental things. One is that we co-govern all of the water within our rohe, Te Mana o Te Wai in action. 2, the wonderful whānau of Ngāti Rangi, we were here sharing their experiences. We have taken the opportunity to work under them, and we're seeking a cultural flow for Turangi Tukua as a result of this take. And 3, that we will monitor and look after this water going forward. We wanted to make sure that we are the consent holders. So we are working towards sharing the actual consent with Taupo District Council in anticipation of allocation and other matters. We want to own our water. So all of this work culminates in the Turangi stormwater issue. So this is 3 waters, Te Mana o Te Wai in action. That is actually a awa. And it's called Hirangi, which is the name of my marae, Hirangi, Te Hi o Te Rangi. And so Hirangi actually means the mists rising off the waters of the Hirangi. well, ain't no mist rising off that at the moment, because when they built Turangi Township, they determined all the stormwater from the town all goes into the Hirangi stream. So up until, I think, what's COVID's like, everything is dog years now, but I think it was about 5 years ago, we actually went to the council and said, you know, we want to make sure that it's at least treated. So this was untreated stormwater going into the Hirangi stream. And so with our advocacy, and Cam Speedy's here today, one of our awesome Pākehā allies who I've worked with for years. It was actually Cam who helped Turangi Tukua to enforce this, and we now have filters on our stormwater in the Hirangi stream with our intention to get it off. So I guess, you know, our levels of participation in Three Waters through Te Mana o Te Wai is going to be complex. So, you know, we want to be Kaitiaki, we want to govern, we want operations. We want to run these. Turangi Tukua want to run that wastewater treatment plant. We want to actually have our people do that. We want to lease our land if the method is appropriate. And we want investment so that we can enable ourselves. All of us are looking at housing developments across the country. We're all going to have to be investing in really high-level Three Waters infrastructure. This provides us the opportunity to do that. I'm going to finish off with solving the capacity problem. So all very well me wiping on about what we're going to do, what we have to do when there's only one of us in each of our rohe, or you know, there's a handful of us trying to carry the load. And because I'm a Māori nerd, I ended up sitting at the table, because I clearly have no life, and counted up, as a result of this new legislation that's coming at us, and current legislation, how many people we're going to need. So the iwi, and I've just done it on 80 iwi, just give or take. I know iwi pop up every now and then, but we're just going to say 80. So if we were just going to have 5 people at an iwi, just 5 people in a team per iwi, that's another 400 iwi practitioners. Hapū Kaitiaki, the backbone. Because we don't want to create empires in our PSGEs. We need to create the empires at the hapū, and then we all deliver together, because there's not enough of us, right? Love the runanga. And then, they're recording this too. But those Kaitiaki, we're going to need 6,000 hapū practitioners if we were just to think we had 3 hapū people at the taiao level doing the mahi that we currently do. Then we've got iwi and hapū technical support, so the planners, the engineers, the mappers, the scientists, the lawyers, the project managers. We're going to need at least 500 in a collective hub to serve us all, because we don't need one each. I know, because we can't afford it. So we need to create some type of floating workforce to support us all. Then we need iwi Māori accredited and experienced commissioners. So to give effect to Te Mana o Te Wai, we need decision makers who are making Te Mana o Te Wai decisions. And at the moment, we've got none. There's a handful of Māori who are in this space, and there's heaps of us who are accredited. And hands up if you've got funding to do the accreditation and then no one's asked you to be on a court, because that's me. I was accredited like 2 rounds and no one asked me to be on their hearings. I feel like they may have thought I was too hard out. Then we've got mātauranga Māori practitioners. You know, that's a really hard figure to quantify. That's your aunties, that's your nannies, that's your cousins that are holding the burden of the pai. But we would need 1,600 experts just to baseline us. Kaiako, they'd have teachers. And all of our teachers, you know, if we had 20 kaiako, and I'm saying that in the broadest sense, I mean, it's people who facilitate your wānanga, it's people who teach you how to grow a kumara. You know, that's 1,600. Then we've got conservation and regeneration specialists. You know, the fencers, the gardeners, the growers, the hunters, the people that actually go on the whenua and know it, not like me, just receive kina if I'm lucky. I generally sit on the beach and wait for them to come in. But those people are gold, right? They're the ones that are actually maintaining our practices. The practice of mātauranga is far more important than the writing of it. So that's just us, 12,820 Kaitiaki required. Conservatively. But wait, there's more. Then I kind of figured out what are the spaces that are needed in non-Māori. That's just us for iwi. In the non-Māori spaces, this is based on the proposed resource management reform. So we would need another 2,000 of us to just baseline participate in the stuff that's coming up. So what's next? We're having a Te Mana o Te Wai a Tinana and online program for training. I say that really aspirationally because because we've got an awesome little team of fabulous people who are killing themselves to pull this together. I'm pulling in every favour. I'm going to find people today. But we're going to have a 2-day session in Rohe and accompanied by an online program with a whole lot of all you fabulous Māori unicorns giving advice on certain things. Te ao takitamu, how to decolonise your council. Tangata, racism in 101. They're going to have me, mana whakahono, much more boring, but... having really good experts and advice to be able to help whānau when they're with the council, because the council's telling us stuff, and sometimes in the moment it's hard to combat that. So that training hopefully be ready September 30th. We're holding a next gen Kaitiaki hui. We have, I've been told today, 280 spaces for all of your next generation, and we're going to bring them together and we're going to wānanga about this capacity issue. We want to design a workforce development plan. We want to design a network that brings all our kids together so that we can actually create cohorts of ourselves. It's going to be like matatini, not as fabulous, not with any singing. But we're going to do it in 2 years. So the first year will be an annual for national, and then we're going to support regional Kaitiaki wānanga so that whānau can collectivise in place. Because you can't do this nationally, you've got to do it differently. So that's in November, and the wonderful Te Aroa whānau have hosted us. Now when people say, well, what's the rangatahi age? I'm like 18 and over. I am still rangatahi. So don't be scared off by that, but we are wanting to bring our next generation into a space where we can collectivise, and we want to do it in a way, because Iwi Chairs will support this, that's run by iwi and hapū and not by Crown agencies. And they are awesome, and don't get me wrong, well, they're not awesome, but they're there. But we need to be able to drive it and support it for ourselves so that it comes from us. So the guidelines and case studies we're going to have out after lunch. After lunch. Part of the process is around, we're doing some training and some tool creation for helping to transition our Māori landowners. So I'm Deputy Chair of the Lake Taupo Forest Trust, where all the pine trees you see are part of our organisation. And so we're going to need help to transition to Te Mana o Te Wai as well. And we want to be the leaders in Te Mana o Te Wai as Māori landowners, dragging the rest of New Zealand with us. We're also in discussions around trying to create some support to assist iwi and hapū in developing Te Mana o Te Wai statements for Three Waters. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. Te ao takitamu, I'm way over. I can see the red flashing light at Rawari, and I'm so glad you didn't stop me. But I'm almost finished. And then Te ao takitamu has designed a council audit. So this is what the council needs to look like to be Te Tiriti compliant and to give effect to Te Mana o Te Wai. And she's designed it in a way for some key indicators of what that needs to look like. And so we would essentially sit in rooms with council and audit them. And then as a result, you take the work plans and say, commit to this and change. But it's got to happen hapū and iwi by hapū and iwi. But that tool is available. And our final bit that we're working on, again, should be ready by September 30, is how to develop a mana whakahono ārohe for yourselves. And we're happy to share all of our learnings as our hapū. How to write a good CIA, so consultants like me don't take all the money. We need to train whānau to do these, not consultants to help you. So we're going to design some really good tools around how you can create CIAs that are driven by you, will enable you to be resourced. And Jill and Beryl are here, and we work together on CIAs and tūpoho with that same outcome. How can we actually provide investment in time and energy to our whānau so the CIAs get what we want, but they're actually being written by the people who have the mātauranga. CVAs, cultural values assessments, and also a one-on-one on how to process a resource consent. So if you get a consent, these are the key things you should be looking for. How big a water take is too much, how much discharge is too much. Just to give you some guidance, because sometimes, you know, these things are quite out of our technical experience. And then finally, how to develop a hapū and iwi taiao statement. I'm not a big fan on iwi management plans. Take too much time, then we have a big launch, everyone comes for kai, and then everyone ignores it. So we've got to find a way for these to be impactful and influential. And I'm so sorry I went over. I'm usually pretty good, but I'm sucking at the time Rake stole from me in the beginning. A CIA is a cultural impact assessment. So kia ora whānau. Thank you for all the mahi you do in your awa and your whenua. And I'm so excited that we can hang out for the next 2 days. So kia ora koutou.